Old Grognard says, let's look at how to create new player character races in 2nd edition AD&D. Hello and welcome. Today we're going to look at the rules and guidelines for turning the various monster races in the Monster Manual type books into player characters. The focus of this part of the DMG is twofold. The first part is on helping you decide whether or not it's a good idea to do this in the first place, and if you do decide to go ahead with it, the second part is on figuring out the game stats for your new player character race with an emphasis on game balance. There are several reasons you might want to do this. One is that someone just wants to play a monster race and it makes sense to let them try it out. Another could be that someone was reincarnated and so you have to figure out their new stats. You also might not have the splat book with the racial stats you need, or you might disagree with the official stats for whatever reason and want to redo them so they mesh with the game you're running. Regardless of what your reasoning is, I think this section is well written and worth checking out. This video is divided into two parts or chapters, whatever you want to call them. The first one is on the part about figuring out if you should or shouldn't do this in the first place, and then the second one is on figuring out the stats for your new PC race while preserving game balance. Let's get started. The races listed in the player's handbook are only a few of the possible intelligent races populating the worlds of AD&D games. Adventurous DMs and players may want to experiment with characters of other races, such as orcs, lycanthropes, ogres, lizardmen, or even dragons. Before you do this, however, you need to know very clearly what you are doing. Unrestricted or ill-considered use of non-standard races can easily and quickly destroy a campaign. Always consider a new race from a variety of angles. How does the new race fit with the other player characters? How does it fit in the campaign in general? What could you accomplish with this race that you couldn't with another? These are all good things to consider by themselves, and variants of these questions are good for whenever you're thinking about adding anything to your game, not just new player character races. An example might be, how does the new spell fit with the other spells in this world? Or, what could you accomplish with this new character class that you couldn't with another? I like to ask questions like these whenever adding new things to a setting. Anyways, let's get back on track and continue with what the DMG says about adding new player character races. The next paragraph talks about how most players who want to play an unusual race just want to do something different and interesting. However, you are also warned that you will have folks who want to use this as an opportunity to do some power gaming. You are then advised to move slowly and carefully. After that, some rules and guidelines are laid out to help guide the process of adding new player character races. I find it disappointing that they didn't follow their own advice when adding new player character races to the game, because it would have been nice for them to be balanced and consistent. However, that's a rant for another day. Here are the guidelines and rules for adding new player character races to your game. The race should be humanoid, i.e., it must have 2 hands, at least 2 legs, and stand generally upright. This can be thought of as a convenience thing to keep the cognitive load from getting out of control. 2nd edition AD&D, especially pre-Wizards of the Coast, is set up to run using Theater of the Mind, so it's not difficult to see why this is important. Our next item is the race must be able to move about on land. Again, this is a convenience thing in most settings. It must also be intelligent. This one is self-explanatory. The race cannot possess special abilities beyond the scope of those already given for other player character races. They then give us a couple of examples of what they mean by this. Although a dragon can polymorph into human form, it cannot be a player character because it has a breath weapon, can polymorph and cast spells, and is not humanoid in its natural state. A brownie could not be a player character because it too has abilities beyond those of the standard player character races. The next four items are clarifications that build on the previous point. The race cannot be extra dimensional or draw on extra dimensional powers. It cannot have innate spellcasting ability. It cannot be undead, and it cannot possess magic resistance. The last item they list is that the race must be cooperative and willing to interact with the human world. This one goes back to the three questions we had at the beginning of this section. They then give us a couple of examples of creatures that are not cooperative and not willing to interact with the outside world. The Duergar, a race of deep-dwelling dwarves, have no desire to deal with humans and seek to avoid contact whenever possible. Satyrs resent intruders into their woods and glades, which rules them out as player characters. You must judge this criterion based on the conditions in your game world. If these conditions are met, the race can be considered as a possible player character race. Some examples of races that definitely fit the profile are half-orcs, orcs, half-ogres, lizardmen, goblins, centaurs, and kobolds. The part where they said, your game world, is important here. An example I like to use is Spelljammer, where the hobgoblin in charge of the ship's catapult isn't looked at the same way that they would be in a, quote, normal groundling setting. Humanoids in Spelljammer are handled more like how we look at aliens in Star Wars than as shoot on sight enemies. So if everything passes up to this point and you've decided to okay a new PC race, then it's time to start figuring out special abilities, ability score modifiers, and things of that nature. Fortunately, that's what the second part of the text is about, so let's look at what they have to say. When experimenting with a new player character race, allow only one at the start. Do not begin your design experiment with a whole party of half-ogres. Start slowly, involving only one player. If the new race is too powerful, it can be easily eliminated. Once the new race is selected, the real work begins. Examine the race and apply all of the following guidelines to it. So the first item we're given is how to figure ability score modifiers. Character abilities. All races, regardless of type, use the same ability generation method as all other player characters. Their scores will range from 3 to 18 unless modified by pluses or minuses. Creature sizes, defined in the Monstrous Compendium, affect abilities as follows. Creatures of tiny, T size, have a -3 modifier to strength. Creatures of small, S size, have a -1 modifier to strength. Creatures of large, L size, have a +1 modifier to strength. Huge H-size creatures gain a +2 to strength, and gigantic G-size creatures have +4. Those with an intelligence less than average, as determined by the DM, or as listed in the Monstrous Compendium, suffer a -1 penalty to intelligence, and those exceptionally intelligent or greater gain a +1 bonus. All other ability modifiers are assigned by the DM. Likely candidates include minuses to charisma and wisdom, and a plus or minus adjustment to dexterity. In all cases, bonuses and penalties should balance out. If a character has a +1 bonus to strength, it should have a -1 penalty to another ability. With the exception of strength, no creature can have a modifier greater than +2 or -2 to any score. The part about strength and size up above isn't absolute. If you feel that a small character race shouldn't have strength penalties, then they don't have to. You also might have a size M character race that you feel should have a +1 to strength. The important part here is that the ability score modifiers make sense and that when you're done, they all balance out. The next item is figuring ability score requirements. Racial ability requirements. It is possible for a creature to have seemingly illogical ability scores. However, you can set minimums and maximums on these. Table 7 in the player's handbook shows these limits for the standard player character races. It's the DM's job to do the same for non-standard races. As a guide, creatures of large size should have at least an 11 strength and, unless they are described as agile or quick, should have a ceiling of 17 to dexterity. Dull-witted creatures, those of low intelligence, should have a limit of 16 to intelligence. The DM can waive any requirements if, for example, a player wants or gets a hill giant character with strength 6. Some rationale should be offered, however. In the case of the weakling hill giant, perhaps he was the runt of the family, cast out by his fellows and forced to take up adventuring. Ability score requirements are there to keep things from getting ridiculous. On the other hand, some tables thrive on ridiculous, and that's why it's good that they said the DM can waive ability score requirements, like with the hill giant they gave as an example. Next up is figuring which character classes should be available or not. Character classes. The DM must judge what character classes the new race can be. Use the information in the next chapter as your guide and start with a narrow range of options. You can always widen it later. Almost any sort of creature can be a fighter. None except humans can be paladins. Those favoring the outdoors, centaurs for example, can be rangers. Those with penalties to wisdom cannot be priests. Others can be priests only if their game description mentions NPC priests and the creature has some type of social organization, a tribe, clan, etc. No non-standard creature can be a druid, as this is a human belief system. Those with penalties to intelligence cannot be wizards. If the description in the monstrous compendium implies that a creature is stupid, dull-witted, or in any way averse to magic and spellcasting, it cannot be a priest or wizard. A dexterity penalty prevents the character from being a thief. Creatures of large size or greater cannot be thieves. If it is implied that the creature is clumsy or awkward, it cannot be a thief. A new character race can be multi-classed if there is more than one potential class open to it. Example, fighter and mage. Classes from the same group cannot combine into multi-classes. Example, fighter ranger, fighter paladin, or ranger paladin. Characters from variant races must also have scores of 14 or higher in the prime requisites of both classes to qualify for multi-class standing. This particular condition does not apply to normal player character races. So these rules are a good starting point and make a decent framework for if you just made a new PC race and haven't had time to figure out if they're going to be a standard PC race or not. Of course, once you decide that they're a standard race in your world, you can do their allowed classes more in line with how the other standard races are set up. Level limits. Like all non-humans, new player character races have level limits. These are determined by character class prime requisite using Table 9 in the DMG. So if the character was a fighter, you would use strength, mage, you'd use intelligence, etc. Again, this is for non-standard races. If you decide that this is going to be a standard race in your world, you can set up the level limits to be more in line with the other standard PC races. Alignment. The monstrous compendium lists alignments for most races. If an absolute alignment is listed, example, good, the player character has that alignment. If only alignment tendencies are given, the player can choose any alignment. This is one of the guidelines I generally ignore. If you want to play a lawful good bugbear, then why not? Your alignment alone is enough to explain why you're an adventurer and not living in the company of other bugbears. Hit points and level advancement. These work the same way that they do for standard character races and classes, except for how we do hit points for characters that are size L or larger. These characters begin with one extra hit point per hit die that they would normally have. So, for example, the Lawful Good Bugbear from earlier would have 3 extra hit points at first level, since bugbears normally have 3 hit dice. Other than that, the character would gain hit points exactly as any other character of their class would. Although this gives large characters a slight advantage on hit points, you also have to keep in mind that they take damage as larger than man size, so the advantages and disadvantages of being size L or larger can quickly even out or even lean towards being negative. Armor. Most creatures, orcs, gnolls, goblins, have an armor class of 10, and thus wear armor for protection. Some creatures, however, have natural armor which is retained by the player character. These characters gain a benefit of a +1 bonus to their AC only if the armor worn is worse than or equal to their natural armor class, as per horse barding. If better armor is worn, natural armor is ignored and armor class is determined by the armor being worn. Odd-sized or odd-shaped creatures can't wear off-the-shelf armor. It must be made to order and costs extra and takes longer to make. Lizard men are an example of characters with natural armor. Using the horse barding rules, a lizard man who dons armor that's worse than or equal to their natural AC of 5 would become AC 4. If the armor is better than AC 5, then they would just have the armor class of whatever the armor would normally have. Movement. Creatures generally have the same movement rate they are assigned in the monstrous compendium. I sometimes adjust movement rates upwards with the justification that the movement rates given are carryovers from first edition and are adjusted for armor worn. However, adjustments like this are the exception and not the rule. Attacks. The player character is allowed the number of attacks given his character class and level, not the number listed in the monster description in the monstrous compendium. If you look at PC races they added over the course of 2nd edition, they generally ignored this when it came to natural attacks. The last 2 items in this section are titled Size Problems and NPC Reactions. This section on NPC reactions is pretty much what you'd think, and we've already touched on some of what they have to say. The part on size problems goes to great lengths to tell us the problems of size L or larger player characters. If you saw the video I did on Dark Sun Half Giants, some of these will sound familiar. This is what they have to say. Size problems. Players who play large-sized creatures hoping to get an advantage over others should quickly discover many problems they didn't anticipate. Consider the plight of the player who decides to play a hill giant. Right away, he'll have a hard time buying basic equipment. Who makes pants for giants in a human town? Everything must be special ordered at 2 to 4 times its normal cost, at least. This is a minor inconvenience compared to other difficulties. Buildings and dungeons are built for humans and other medium-sized creatures, denying the large fellow the opportunity for both a hearty drink and exciting adventure. Even the toughest character will tire of drinking from measly cups and buying 5 dinners at a time. Will he enjoy spending the night in a leaky stable while his companions enjoy warm feather beds upstairs in the inn? Days of traveling will quickly show him the joys of walking, while everyone else rides. No horse can carry him, especially when his companions gallop spryly away from oncoming danger, leaving him in its path. The costs of replacing broken furniture will quickly become prohibitive. Ropes will have an annoying tendency to break when the big lunk tries to climb them. And the hill giant better have at least 20 friends handy to pull him out of that 30-foot pit. I don't know about you, but it sounds to me like they're trying to discourage us from playing size L characters. I think this is a good set of rules for a DM to use when adding new player character races to their game. I like to use the balancing logic they present whenever adding new things to a game, regardless of what they are or which game I'm adding them to. I find the results are usually balanced and fit well with the rest of the game world. As always, if you have any questions or cool stories to share, please leave them in the comments. Likes and shares are always appreciated as well. Thanks for watching. 19th century orcish foot soldier and I would like to wish you a wonderful rest of your day.